This is The Great Debate, a 60 Minutes special event, live from Nine's election headquarters.
Good evening and welcome to The Great Debate. I'm Sarah Abo. Well, Australia is about to decide who will lead us for the next 3 years. But right now, a lot of Australians are still undecided about who that should be. So tonight, the leaders of the two major parties are facing off in what is the last head-to-head contest before polls open tomorrow morning and early voting begins. We'd like to welcome the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and Opposition Leader Anthony Albanese. Tonight, they'll be taking questions from our expert panel representing Australia's largest media organisation, Nine's political editor, Chris Yeoman, Nine Radio's Deborah Knight, representing 3AW, 2GB, 4BC and 6PR, and from Nine's newspapers, Chief Political Correspondent for The Age and Sydney Morning Herald, David Crowe. We are broadcasting across the country this evening, including in key marginal electorates on Nine Television and Nine Now, through the websites of Australia's leading newspapers and simulcast across our radio network. This debate is, of course, all about you at home, your issues, your concerns, and who has the best plan to make your lives better. So tonight, you'll score this debate, you'll decide who's won. In the corner of your screen is a QR code. Use your phone to scan that code anytime during the debate and you'll be invited to vote anonymously. Or you can head to ninenews.com.au. There is one question waiting for you there right now. More will be added throughout the evening and we'll reveal your viewer verdict once the debate is over. Well, we know Australians have a lot of questions, so to make sure we get through as many of them as possible tonight, both leaders have agreed to keep their answers to 60 seconds, except for their opening statements, which will be 90 seconds. Our leaders have only blank paper and a pen with them to make notes throughout the evening. Well, it's time now to get started. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, won the coin toss earlier and will give the opening statement. Over to you, Mr Morrison.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Happy Mother's Day. I'm incredibly optimistic about Australia's future. What we've been able to achieve together over these last 3 years, and particularly the last two, has been quite extraordinary as we've come through one of the biggest challenges our country has known since the Second World War. We faced down 15% unemployment and now we're at 4% unemployment. And we know that a strong economy is what can secure a stronger future. A strong economy is what can ensure we can improve the lives of Australians. And so this election is a choice about a stronger economy under the plan we've had in place and takes us into the future, or a weaker one, about a stronger future or a more uncertain future. Our plan delivers another 1.3 million jobs, 400,000 more small businesses, investments in the skills and infrastructure that Australians need to grow, lower taxes, and ensuring that we're investing in the clean energy, the better roads that are needed right across the country, and of course guaranteeing essential services that you rely on and defending our country with record investments in defence. This is a choice. It's a choice between strength and weakness. It's a choice between certainty and uncertainty, what you know about the government and what you don't know about the Labor Party and the opposition who have had 3 years to tell you but haven't. So tonight, it's all about a choice between who can best manage that economy for a stronger future, because a strong economy means a stronger future.
That's your time. Thank you, Mr Morrison. Mr Albanese.
Well, thanks very much. And I join with Scott in wishing all the mums out there a very happy Mother's Day. A better future is within our reach, and if I lead Labor into government, this is what a better future will look like. We'll have cheaper childcare. We'll have stronger Medicare, including with cheaper medicines, and make it easier to see a doctor. We'll have more secure work, and we have a plan to lift wages. We also have a plan for clean energy through renewables. We can have cleaner, cheaper energy driving advanced manufacturing here, bringing back jobs here, having a more resilient economy here so we can stand on our own 2 feet. And we can train Australians for those jobs with fee-free TAFE and with additional university places. And we need to fix the crisis in aged care. It was summed up in the interim report with a one-word statement: neglect in its title. Older Australians deserve dignity and respect in their later years, and we have a plan to deliver that. The truth is we can't afford just 3 more years of the same. 3 more years of drift and neglect. 3 more years of not accepting responsibility. Your vote is powerful. Your vote can change the country. And with a better government, we can be an even better country. I'm committed to working each and every day to accepting the responsibility that comes with high office and creating a better future for Australia.
Well, thank you both. And before we begin with our questions, I'd like to get a commitment from the both of you that we will have truthful answers tonight.
Of course.
Yes.
Now, we know right around the country, households are of course concerned about forking out to feed their families, how much the groceries are costing in their baskets every day. What can you do to actually reduce the cost of lettuce and even on a day like Mother's Day, the cost of flowers? Mr Albanese.
Well, what you can do is have a plan to address cost of living issues. And that's why we've put forward practical plans, ones that'll make a difference for working families by having cheaper childcare. We have a plan for cheaper medicines, so the maximum price will be $30. We also have a plan for the economy that makes sure that we prioritise productivity so that we're not placing upward pressure on inflation. So our plan, which consists of powering Australia for cheaper energy, which consists of fixing the NBN, better infrastructure investment, cheaper childcare and making more things here, is all aimed at growing the economy in a way that doesn't put additional pressure on inflation. They're the sort of measures that you can do that will make a practical difference to people's lives.
Mr Morrison, lettuce costs $5, we know that. How can you actually reduce that cost?
Dealing with the costs of living in Australia, and there is upward pressure on those costs of living. We know what's causing them. It's been caused by international factors all around the world, the war in Europe, and of course the disruption that has occurred all around the world following the pandemic. But the way we've been able to address this issue is making sure we manage money wisely. Australia has maintained our AAA credit rating, one of only 9 countries in the world to do so during the pandemic. And that meant through our economic plan, we've turned the budget around by over $100 billion in the last year. That meant we could cut the fuel tax. It meant we could pay $250 to pensioners and others on fixed incomes, and $420 that Australians could keep more of what they earn when they put their tax return in on the 1st of July. We can't control all the forces that are coming from overseas, but what we can do by managing money well, that puts downward pressure on inflation. Managing money well means that we can invest and guarantee the essential services you rely on, those cheaper medicines, and the Medicare funding, $31.4 billion, 88.8% Medicare bulk billing rate. That's how we get the job done.
Yes, Sarah, the problem with what Scott just said is that the cost of living measures that he spoke about are all temporary. They have all the sincerity of a fake tan. They disappear once people have cast their vote, and then people are back on their own again. This is a government that doubled the debt before the pandemic. And what Scott didn't tell you about the AAA credit rating was that that was achieved under the former Labor government. We were the government that achieved that, and it has been maintained. But the truth is that there is an enormous amount of waste and rorts in this budget.
That's your time, Mr Albanese. I mean, in practical terms, it sounds like a no is the answer to that question. We might go to our panel now. Deborah Knight.
Well, one of the things that can make a difference to ease the cost of living pressures is halving the fuel excise. And that's helped businesses, that's helped a lot of families. Prime Minister, will you keep that help coming beyond September?
No, that's not what we're proposing to do, because what we do when we provide this relief is it's well designed, it's temporary, it's targeted, it's affordable. That's how we did JobKeeper as well. What we're ensuring we're doing by providing that cost of living relief now is to deal with the spike in fuel prices we've seen from the war in Europe and the disruption around the world. And as Treasury and many others estimate, we will see those oil prices come down by that time at the end of September.
So does that mean, though, that as we see interest rates set to rise, inflation set to rise, that all of us will be paying full price for fuel?
Once we get to the end of that 6-month period, then we will continue, of course, to provide those cheaper medicines. We'll continue to provide the strong financial management and the getting unemployment down further, which the Reserve Bank is now estimating to go to 3.5%. The best protection you have against rising cost of living is your job and having security in your job and being in a growing economy where you have more choices. And under our government, we've been able to get unemployment down to 4%, youth unemployment down to 8.3%. We have the lowest level of unemployment, equal lowest in 48 years. A job is what gives Australians security to deal with rising costs and rising pressures on interest rates, which has a result of the Australian economy springing back to life and leading the world.
Yeah.
Mr Albanese, with the fuel excise, obviously a lot of people are wanting help now, here and now. Will you deliver a commitment to extend the fuel excise cuts beyond September?
Well, this is a temporary change, but to take up what...
So that's a no from both of you?
We have said that we'll maintain the same position on that. But what the Prime Minister spoke about then was he spoke about the security of work. The problem is that there have never been more Australians working in insecure work than there are at the moment. We've seen this plethora of growth in labour hire and contracting out. We have 500,000 Australians who are working 3 or more jobs. Now, they're not doing that out of choice. They're doing that to try and get by. And that's why one of the things that we need to do is to address wages. The cost of living is about money in as well as money out. And in terms of wage growth, we've seen wages go backwards in the last year. We've seen wages flatline for 10 years, and the government have no plan to address secure wages. When we've asked questions in the Parliament about should Australians be paid the minimum wage, the answer from the government is that it's complicated. Well, it's not complicated to suggest that at least the minimum wage of $20.33 isn't too much to ask.
David Crowe, you have the next question.
Prime Minister, you've announced billions of dollars in spending in the last couple of months, and economists are saying that that has led in part to the Reserve Bank lifting interest rates last week. Do you take any responsibility for that interest rate rise?
Well, the Treasury themselves have disputed that outright at Senate estimates, as you know. And as the Reserve Bank Governor has also said, David, the Reserve Bank Governor himself has said that what has been driving their decision to take rates from 0.1%, and let's recall, in the United Kingdom, they're up at 1%. They've gone up 90 basis points. In New Zealand, they've gone up 125 basis points. In the United States and Canada, they've gone up 75 basis points. What has happened is Australia, because the Australian economy is leading the world out of advanced economies all around the world right now, we've got more downward pressure on interest rates in those economies and more downward pressure on the rising costs of living compared to other countries around the world. And that's because our economic plan is getting people into work, giving people confidence, businesses are investing, business are getting back on their feet. Now, you can't take that for granted. If you take down that shield that we have put up through our economic policies over the course of these last 2 and 3 years,
but are you saying interest rate rises are global
of even higher
factors?
Interest rate rises and even greater pressures
is it out
on,
of your
on
hands?
the cost of living? Sorry, I didn't
Well, I'm saying, are you saying that interest rate rises are due to global factors and really it's out of your hands? It's not your job to keep the rates lower?
No, what I'm saying is that global factors, of course, have driven the Reserve Bank's decision to lift interest rates. But in addition to that, it has been the success of the Australian economy, which means that in the same way we brought to an end JobKeeper, the Reserve Bank is saying the Australian economy is getting back on its feet again. And Australians themselves have been doubling down on preparing for that time. We've had double the number of people who've gone and ensured they've moved from variable rates to fixed rates. We've also seen Australians get further ahead of their mortgages during the pandemic. They've doubled the buffer that they've had over the course of the last 2 years.
Prime Minister, that was an additional question. David Crowe, you have one for the opposition leader?
Mr Albanese, you've backed in pretty much all of this spending and in fact you've offered some more spending of your own. So where in your economic plan is there any measure that would actually keep interest rates lower?
Because the priority that we've had in terms of our investments have been in areas which will grow productivity, which will grow the economy in a way that doesn't put pressure on inflation. Take, for example, childcare, and it's one of the reasons why our childcare plan has been backed in so strongly by the business community. Our childcare plan to assist 96% of families will be better off, 4% the same. Will lift productivity. It will increase women's workforce participation.
But that would take so long to arrive. I mean, are you basically powerless now to do anything when the Reserve Bank is talking about rates going to 2.5%?
What we have done is to make sure that in all of the areas where we've prioritised investment, they are in areas that will grow the economy. Now, Scott said last year that petrol prices and interest rates would go up under us. The truth is they've gone up under them. And the Reserve Bank have foreshadowed further increases this year. What we understand is that we need to address structural issues that address cost of living pressures
Mr. Albanese, that is your time.
Because of the pressure that will be on families right now.
The next question is from Chris Yorman.
Mr Albanese, your mantra is that everything is going up except your wages. So will you guarantee that wages will rise faster than inflation under Labor?
I certainly will guarantee that wages will grow faster than they will under this current government.
Sorry, the question is faster than inflation. So real wages will rise under Labor. Is that what you're promising?
Our objective is to have our objective is to have real wage increases, and we have practical plans to do that. Putting secure work as an objective of the Fair Work Act, addressing same job, same pay, so that people who are doing the same work get the same pay. Properly defining casualisation, dealing with the gig economy so that people in the gig economy are properly regulated and are paid at least the minimum wage. Addressing the gender pay gap through greater transparency as well. And the other thing that we will do, Chris, is address feminised industries such as aged care. We'll put in a submission to the Fair Work Commission that's dealing at the moment with aged care workers who are paid just $22 an hour. The Aged Care Royal Commission said unless we address that, people will leave the industry.
But just to summarise, you can't guarantee that real wages will rise.
The difference between myself and the current government and Scott Morrison is that we will try to do what we can in measures and structures to improve real wages. We will support, for example, minimum wage increases. At the moment, this government won't even do that.
All right, Mr Albanese, I'm sure everybody is trying, and the Prime Minister is trying to keep retail power prices down, but wholesale power prices are spiking. So can you guarantee that retail bills won't go up under your government?
Well, electricity prices have fallen 10% since I became Prime Minister.
And wholesale
prices are about 30% of the overall bill. What actually drives electricity prices is the balance which is in both transmission and in the retail. And we put in the retail guarantees, which ensured that we got rid of those default offers, which was driving people's prices up. We have the supply agreements out of the big gas companies to ensure that the gas that is going into our energy economy, we're paying about a quarter to a third of what the international price is. And we had the big retail legislation on the big energy companies, which put the strength back onto the consumer to ensure that they were getting a better deal.
But prices are on the march now, aren't they?
That's how we got prices to come down by 10%.
Wholesale
now, that's
prices
what we've
are on the march
achieved.
now, aren't
but
they?
wholesale prices isn't what people pay, Chris.
It's a third of their bill and they're on the way up.
I know, and ours are going down by 10% since I've become Prime Minister. Now, what I'd add to that, Chris, is what was driving those wholesale prices earlier in the year, what was happening with coal prices. And the energy market operator have already said that those coal prices feeding into the energy market that were driving up wholesale prices are now coming down. So what we've done is actually cut electricity prices. Under the Labor Party, when they were last in, electricity prices more than doubled.
But again, can I just say that governments cannot guarantee what will happen to the retail price, can they?
What we can do is ensure that we've got reliable, affordable energy and we're not switching it off with the irresponsible targets to reduce emissions. We have affordable, achievable targets that keeps the lights on and keep prices down, because that's what we've achieved.
I think we've got our answer. Prime Minister Deb Knight, you have the next question.
There was a time when governments tried to pay off debt. Back in black was the mantra. But taxes are being cut and spending keeps on happening. So, Prime Minister, where is all the money coming from?
What Australia has at the moment is a debt level that is lower than all of the major advanced countries around the world.
And we're facing $1 trillion in debt, though.
It will be. Within a few years' time, we'll be reaching those gross levels. Today, it's about $885 billion. We're paying 2.2% interest on it on loan terms of about 7.2 years.
So if families have to balance their budget, why not governments?
Well, this is exactly what we will be achieving. Before the pandemic, our government brought the budget back into balance. Now, of course, in the pandemic, we had to lean in and save the economy through JobKeeper, the single largest economic intervention which saved lives, it saved livelihoods, it saved businesses. And that expenditure ensured that the Australian economy could be where it is today, leading the advanced world, so we can be looking forward optimistically to our future. But we can't take that for granted. But getting debt and deficit under control means that you keep reducing your deficit over time. The Labor Party have already said they're going to have higher deficits than us, and what we will be doing is ensuring that we'll do exactly what we did last time. We've already balanced that budget once, and coalitions have a record of balancing budgets.
Well, the last time we had a doubling of the debt before the pandemic. That's what happened. What happened.
Mr Albanese, you keep attacking the government's economic performance and their track record, but you're matching them on spending. If they're doing so badly, why do you copy them?
What they're not having is a plan for future growth. We just had a question about energy, for example. They've had.
But why do you keep matching them if they're doing so badly? That's the question.
Well, we're not matching them in a whole range of areas. Where there's a good idea, we'll match it.
But you are on cutting the price to subsidised medicines, to expanding access to the seniors card, to extending the freeze-on deeming rates. You're matching them on their spending.
Because, Deb, in those areas, people are doing it so tough at the moment. But what we also need is a plan for reform. This government have had 22 different energy policies and haven't landed one. We actually need an energy policy that actually works in the medium and long term, as well as provides short-term relief. Our plan...
Like one that cut electricity prices by 10%.
Our plan, which is based upon the Australian Energy Market Operators Integrated Systems Plan, fixing transmission, ensuring that renewables are 82% of the system of the national energy market by 2030, will reduce energy costs by $275 by 2025.
But we had the modelling
which is out there. That's not right.
No, it is.
That is not right.
That's how it works.
It does not work that way, which is why our plan is completely modelled. And if you look at the system as well, for the same reason.
How do they recoup the investment? How do they recoup the investment on the increase in transmission?
For the same reason that households, every state government is committed to the integrated systems plan of the Australian Energy Market Operator.
And how much more are you going to spend on transmission?
It is happening now. That investment will happen, and
how much extra are you going to spend?
And the plan is there.
How much more are you going to spend on transmission?
The plan is there. No. Transmission
because then they have to recover that from the consumers.
Transmission is an investment, Scott.
Yes, I know.
For the same
reason, from the consumers.
For the same reason, Scott.
And they pay the electricity prices, which mean prices go up.
Well, it's just not right.
It's 30% of the bill.
It is the same reason why someone puts a solar panel on their roof, because what it does is you make that investment and it reduces your power prices. That same principle applies to the economy. You have, Scott, how much are you spending on Snowy 2.0?
We're spending $5 billion.
Yeah, and it won't be plugged into the grid when it's opened.
Well, of course it will be.
No, it won't be.
Of course it
won't be. You don't have a plan, so it goes into the grid on day one. And that is the problem here. No, you haven't addressed the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit you have not addressed. And low-hanging fruit, when it comes to fixing energy in this country, is fixing transmission.
Yes, and that puts up the price of
electricity. No, it doesn't. It makes sure that renewables can go into the grid.
They're 30% of the bill, Anthony.
It makes sure
30% of the bill, and they recover it. They recover those costs from the consumer.
There isn't an energy company or energy economist in the country who agrees with you.
No, there are Frontier Economics is one, and even the Grattan Institute, I remember, actually made comments in favour of this as well. You put up the transmission costs,
when it comes to energy and climate, you are all over the shop. Just all over the shop.
Electricity prices down 10%.
Mr Morrison, Mr Albanese, there's plenty of time for this contest of ideas. So thank you both for your time. Next question, David Crow.
Mr Albanese, young Australians are dealing with rising rents, out-of-reach house prices, student debts. Do you have in your agenda one single big policy just about helping young people?
Well, young people are doing it really tough. There's no doubt about that. And in order to address housing, what you need is a comprehensive plan. And we have that. We have that in terms of increased investment in social housing. We have that with 20,000 additional housing dwellings. We have a plan for 10,000 affordable housing units for essential workers. We also have a plan for emergency housing in a range of other areas. But we also have our Help to Buy scheme. The Help to Buy scheme would enable low and middle income earners to have that assistance with a shared equity scheme. Now, that's something that's operated in Western Australia for 30 years and has operated
excuse me, Mr
successfully.
Albanese, it's not really just about young Australians, though. That's across the board, that scheme.
True.
And also, it's only 10,000 homes every year. Now, Australia has 10 million households. So isn't that just a drop in the ocean when young Australians are trying to get to the Australian dream?
Well, it is true to say, David, that young Australians are finding it more and more difficult to get access to the great dream of home ownership. But what we have is modest, practical plans to make a difference, whether it's public housing, whether it be affordable housing, or whether it be assisting people into home ownership. That's an additional plan from the ones that we've supported the government to implement.
Mr Morrison, you mentioned the $886 billion Commonwealth debt a little earlier. How long is it going to take young Australians to pay that back?
They will be in work. They will have jobs and an economy that is coming out of this pandemic stronger than any other advanced economy in the world, because we put JobKeeper in place, because we put the cash flow boost in place, because we took action. And yes, we had to borrow to do that. And had we not borrowed, the Australian economy would not look like it does today. And I think Australians understand that, and that's why they supported those programs so importantly. But the biggest thing I think we can do for young Australians is to make sure they get jobs. And that's why we have 800,000 training places as part of our budget just this year. And that's ensuring those training places to the tune of $3.7 billion. That comes on top of the support we've been getting apprentices into trade training. We have more apprentices in trade training today, 220,000 of them, than we've had since records began in 1963. I know from being a social services minister that if you don't get a young person into a job by their early 20s, the chance of them spending a lifetime on welfare goes through the roof. So my mission has always been to get young Australians into work.
Chris Hillman, your question.
Our character has been a central part of this campaign. In fact, Mr Albanese, your campaign rests on the claim that the Prime Minister is a liar. This week you claimed you were not given the opportunity to detail a policy you clearly did not know. Wasn't that a lie?
No. I do know the policy, Chris, and the policy centres on making sure...
Sorry, at the time you clearly did not know it.
No,
we're not talking about the policy now, we're talking about your response to the policy. Your central claim against the Prime Minister is that he routinely lies. So, did you know the policy at the time? And when you said you weren't given the opportunity, wasn't that a lie?
No, it wasn't, Chris. The NDIS is about people. And that was what my response was, making sure that people are put back at the centre of the NDIS. Now, we have a range of ways in which we'll do that, in terms of stopping the cuts, stopping the waste, making sure there's more efficiency, a plan in terms of people in the regions who are missing out, and fixing the National Disability
But again, Mr Albanese,
Agency.
this question is not about the NDIS. This question is about how you responded when you were under pressure, and put in the same circumstances as the Prime Minister, you responded the same way, didn't you?
That's not right, Chris. The question was... The question of the NDIS isn't about a number of dot points. What it's about is, how do you fix the NDIS? Labor created the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We've been very concerned out there that people are having their programs cut with real consequences for
Mr.
people.
Albanese. I mean, this election has been about character. You've both made it about character. We do need to scrutinise that, Chris.
Scott Morrison, you say that people know you, and they clearly do. So why don't they trust you?
It's been a tough 3 years, particularly the last 2 years. And I know that over that period of time there would have been many disappointments. People would have disagreed with many of the things I did, and would have a different view about how things might have been managed. And so I can understand the hurt and the feelings that people have had coming out of a time like this. And that can lead them to feel bad about their governments and bad about their leaders, as we've seen in many places around the world. So I understand that. And what I do say to those Australians is that you've seen what we've achieved together. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates this country has ever seen. We have got an economy that is growing faster than the advanced economies of the world, and we have one of the lowest death rates in the world, and we've achieved that together.
This is about you. The Labor Party knows that. They're making it about you because they know that sentiment exists in the community. And as they would say, it's the people who know you best, Barnaby Joyce, Gladys Berejiklian, even Emmanuel Macron, people that you've worked with that have questioned your honesty. Are they all wrong about that?
Well, from time to time, I will disagree with people and they won't agree with the position that I'm taking, whether it's deciding to put the national interest first and not buy the French submarines. From time to time, I have disputes with state premiers about how we do funding, and I have very firm views about these things. And many years ago, when Barnaby and I were in very different roles to the one we're in now, today, he and I, Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, leading this economy out of one of the worst times this country has ever seen.
That's time, Prime Minister. Deb, your next question.
Mr Albanese, you've been in the public eye for almost 3 decades now in Parliament, but a lot of people still say they don't know you and they don't know what you stand for. Has making yourself a small target in this campaign backfired?
Deb, I think Australians know what I stand for. I've had the same values my entire life. The values of supporting a fair day's pay for a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The values of supporting essential universal services such as Medicare, supporting universal superannuation. Now we want to extend that to universal childcare.
But a lot of voters aren't sure you even know who you are. I had a listener, Mario, contact me this week to say you used to be a radical socialist, but just because you've got a new set of glasses, how can we believe that you're a reformed man? That's Mario. What do you say to him?
Well, I came out of the womb a Labor voter, and with 3 great faiths. I was raised by my late mum, who I pay tribute to today. I came out with 3 great faiths: the Labor Party, the Catholic Church and the South Sydney Rugby League Football Club. And I've remained true to all 3 of them. They're the values that were instilled in me. I learnt very early on through my life the power of government to make a difference to people's lives. It's what gave me a secure roof over myself and my single mum's head in council housing in Camperdown. Healthcare was essential for her as an invalid pensioner. In terms
Mr.
of
Albanese.
my own education was something that I was able to get as well. I've held those values consistently throughout my political life.
Mr Albanese, we have agreed to 60-second responses.
Sure.
Deb, your question to the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, the hard truth of it is that a lot of people don't like you. And Chris referred to the comments from those on your own side, being called a hypocrite and a liar and a horrible person. Shouldn't a leader unite, not divide?
I'm the first Prime Minister to face an election after having been elected for the first time 3 years ago. And when I became Prime Minister, our party needed to be united, and that's what I've done. We haven't seen the revolving door under my leadership. I brought my party together. I brought my coalition together by getting to net zero by 2050. That is something that took a lot of leadership to bring my party together in unity. See, politics is not about when people...
You won't increase the 2030 target,
No,
Scott.
I won't increase the 2030 target.
Even though you say it'll be higher.
I won't increase
because Barnaby Joyce won't let you.
No, because I think it's the wrong policy. That's why.
But you say you'll achieve better than 26 to 28.
I don't want to shut people's businesses, and I don't want to put up people's electricity prices.
So you won't achieve higher than 26 to 28?
We believe we'll hit 35.
Well,
and you want us to hit 43.
Why won't you have that as a target then?
Because
Barnaby Joyce won't let you. That's the problem with the coalition.
Our government was able to come together and ensure that we could commit to that net zero by 2050. Now, what our plan is about ensuring we invest $22 billion over the next 10 years to ensure we can hit those targets out to 2050. But the question I was being asked...
Prime Minister, if you're not divisive, why aren't you campaigning in the seats where moderate Liberals are in the fight of their lives against independents?
Where I'm campaigning is where the contest is between Mr Albanese and myself.
You're not costing those moderate Liberals votes?
No, I'm very confident in my candidates and members in all of those seats.
So will you campaign
and they are strong
seats?
Local members, and they are facing local independents, or so-called. Where the contest I'm engaged in is the choice between whether Mr Albanese should be Prime Minister, someone who's never done a budget, never had a finance portfolio, and is seeking
Scott,
to take
you can't even campaign with your treasurer.
You can't
campaign
I was with him today,
in Kooyong.
Anthony. I was with him today at a rally in Victoria. I've been in Kooyong with him. Yeah. So you can't just make stuff up, mate. I mean, you've got 53 reviews you've announced during the course of this campaign. That's more than the number of policies that you've announced. Well, you're going to hit the ground reviewing, are you, if you come to government? You've had 3 years to come up with a plan, and all you're coming up with the reviews. You can't run to be Prime Minister and just say, I'll make it up when I get there.
We're in North Sydney right now, and the member for North Sydney will not be seen with you during this campaign.
That's your assertion.
Now, we are, of course, giving you latitude here to engage. David Crowe, you have the next question.
Mr Morrison, have you seen any corruption on your side of politics in your time? And if so, what did you do about it?
No, I haven't.
Never? No wrongdoing?
No.
Never happened in the Liberal Party at all?
I haven't seen that, no.
Is that why you don't really feel there's a need for an independent commissioner against corruption federally?
I do believe there's a need for an integrity commission, and I have 347 pages of legislation, and I have $60 million to support the establishment of such an integrity commission to deal with criminal behaviour that can occur. And we've already introduced the first tranche of that, which is the Law Enforcement Integrity Commission, which now also reaches into, with $50 million to support them, reaching into the Australian Taxation Office, the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission, APRA, as well as dealing with agencies like the Department of Home Affairs.
What about that time where there was money from property developers in New South Wales that was routed down to the Free Enterprise Foundation and then back through federal offices back to New South Wales? New South Wales ICAC didn't like the look of that. Wouldn't you call that wrongdoing? You're
assuming that I have some knowledge or involvement or awareness or involvement in any of those issues, which I clearly do not.
Mr Albanese, you've spent your life in New South Wales Labor. Have you seen corruption in your time, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, quite clearly. The Independent Commission Against Corruption here in New South Wales has found corrupt conduct. That's a good thing. Whether they've found it against Labor or Liberal members of Parliament, local councillors, this is a body that Scott said was a kangaroo court and dismissed it and was rebuked by the outgoing ICAC Commissioner, as well as a massive distancing from Premier Dominic Perrottet, to his great credit. We need to make sure that we restore faith in the integrity of our political system. I think overwhelmingly, people go into politics across the spectrum for all the right reasons. They go in to take their view about how they help their fellow Australians in the best way possible. But the truth is that there's a stench around Canberra at the moment.
But that includes Labor too, doesn't it?
You have...
In the past.
In the past, wherever anyone has done the wrong thing, it's a good thing that action is taken. But you can't have a block of land at Leppington Triangle around Badgerys Creek.
That's your time.
That's worth $3 million, where the government pays $30 million for it. You can't have sports rorts and all of these scandals, and nothing happens on this government's watch. And the reason why we don't have a National Integrity Commission is sitting behind the Prime Minister.
You know, the truth is really that the voters out there are feeling disenchanted. Frankly, neither of them are thrilled with either of you as a choice for Prime Minister. We know that more than a quarter of the voters out there are undecided. I mean, you've been campaigning for 4 weeks. Why haven't you convinced them, Scott Morrison, that you are the one to be re-elected?
Well, you're exactly right that there is a choice. Elections are a choice.
But they're not thrilled with either of you.
Between not whether you like someone or don't like someone, it's a choice about who you think has the economic plan and the strength to lead the country at a time which is almost unprecedented since the time of the Second World War and the Great Depression. Our
Mr.
plan
Albanese,
has put people into work.
Do you think you've done enough in the 4 weeks that you've been campaigning, albeit the week you were off?
Well, to go back to your original question, Australians are disillusioned with the political system. We all need to do better. It's one of the reasons why we need a National Anti-Corruption Commission to restore faith. Now, we have a series of plans out there for cheaper childcare, for more secure work, for addressing climate change as the opportunity that it is, a range of policies. We'll continue to put those forward, and the Australian people will decide. They'll start voting tomorrow in a federal election. Our democracy is precious. We need to value it. We need to make sure that Australians can have faith in it, and that's why we need to do whatever we can to create institutions and structures that enhance that faith in our political system.
Well, can I ask then, given he's been so passionate about this, why you haven't drafted your own legislation for such a commission? You've had 3 years. You've got 2 pages. That's it.
Scott, that's not right.
No, I'm sorry.
We have put forward...
It is right, actually.
It is not right.
Where's the legislation?
We have put forward... Scott, you don't allow debates on anything in the Parliament, let alone debates on opposition legislation.
Do you have draft legislation for your commission?
As you know, oppositions don't draft legislation.
You can draft legislation any day you want.
Governments do.
No.
And our legislation...
So you've never drafted a private member's bill? You've never drafted a private member's bill, ever?
Our legislation will have. You haven't allowed any debates on
Have you
private
ever
members'
drafted
bill.
a private member's bill?
Yeah, I have, because previous
so
people...
you can do legislation. You just haven't done one for this proposal you're so excited about.
Previous governments,
So
Scott,
2 pages.
have allowed for parliamentary
You haven't got a
debate.
plan. You
We
haven't
have
got
got
any
a plan, and I'll tell you what
No,
the
you
plan
don't.
is.
No.
It's a plan that you don't like, because what you want
It's only 2
is that
pages.
the Cabinet
It looks
has
a bit
to
like
decide...
that. There's nothing on it.
The Cabinet has to decide whether there can be an investigation. So a minister comes before you about something like Leppington Triangle or some of the other rorts and scandals which are there, and they get to decide
So you'll come in
whether
here,
an
you'll throw mud
independent
around,
integrity
but you won't
commission,
put your own
whether
plan
an
on the
integrity
table.
commission. We'll have legislation this year if
will
we're
you?
elected.
Where is it?
We will
You've
have
had
it this
3
year
years.
if we're elected.
You've been hiding in the bushes. Small
rubbish.
target,
Okay, we might-
big risk.
we might-
We will have it this year. And one of the
We
things
do
that
have to leave
Australians
it there.
know
We're just
is
gonna
they will
pause
never
there.
get a National Anti-Corruption Commission under this Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. We will pause there because we do have a lot more to come. Now, we've asked the 2 leaders a number of questions, of course, and there will be more to come. Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese will also have the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions, though they've been doing a fair job of that already. Now, they'll have a moment now to prepare for those formal questions, and for everyone watching at home, to give your viewer verdict on some of the key issues already covered tonight, you can scan the QR code on screen and start scoring this debate by voting anonymously. Radio listeners can head to 9news.com.au. Now, we have already had an enormous response tonight, so make sure you log on and have your say. Earlier, we asked whether you decided who you'll vote for, and 26% said they're yet to make up their minds. We're hoping tonight helps you do just that. You're watching a 60 Minutes special event, The Great Debate. Welcome back to the great debate between the 2 men hoping to lead Australia when the election dust settles in just under 2 weeks. Now, we have had a huge response online from you, so if you are struggling with the website at the moment, please be patient and refresh. You will get through. Now, our leaders have the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions. The Prime Minister gave the first statement, so Mr Albanese will have the first question.
Thanks very much, Scott. Both you and I have unfortunately got COVID this year. But because we followed the science and were vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the impact was less than it was on people who are unvaccinated. We followed that science. But early on in the pandemic, when Australia was running way at the back of the queue in the 90s in terms of countries of people who were getting vaccinated, you said that it wasn't a race. And as a result, there was more people had worse health outcomes, and indeed as well there was a bigger impact on the economy. Isn't it a fact, Prime Minister, do you now accept that indeed it was a race and you should have secured vaccines earlier?
It was a race, Anthony, and we shouldn't have described it in those terms. But what we did do, working together and closely with the Chief Medical Officer at the time, who was Professor Brendan Murphy, is we were taking care to make sure that the vaccines that were approved in Australia were the right vaccines, and that I could confidently say to Australians, with the support of medical authorities, that they would be safe for Australians. And that's exactly what we did. Yes, we had our challenges early on. We made sure that we were manufacturing vaccines in Australia with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we ensured that when we had the setbacks, I put in place the General to do this under a military command to ensure that we got the vaccination program back on track. And what we achieved is we ensured that everyone who wanted a vaccine could have one in the middle of October. That was only 2 weeks out from the original deadline that we set ourselves at the start of the year. So yes, it's true, Anthony, we had our setbacks, but we came back, we got the vaccines, and we now have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, as well as the strongest economies, and one of the lowest death rates from COVID. A lot of people would have liked to have been in Australia when it came to coming through this COVID pandemic, because Australia has led the world.
Prime Minister, your opportunity to ask Mr Albanese a question.
Yes, Anthony, even in the last 3 years, you have been for the abolition of negative gearing and against the the abolition of negative gearing. You've been for retirees' taxes and against them. You've been for tax cuts for people earning $125,000. You've been against them. That's just the last 3 years. You were for turn back of boats. That's what you say now, but you're against them before. You were for a gas plant, you say now, up in the Kurri, but previously you were against it. Now, what's changed? And given you've changed your mind on so many things that are apparently so foundational and were so passionate about it being against these things, how can Australians now think that you're actually for them?
I supported the Labor Party at the last election. We had a range of policies that we put forward that were not successful. When I became Labor leader on day one, I said that under my leadership we'd be defined by being Labor leader, not by being opposition leader. That all policies would start anew and on the basis of the positions that we would come to when I announced them. So on housing, for example, we've come up with a better way. We've come up with the Housing Australia Future Fund. We've come up...
So is negative gearing now a good thing?
With our Help to Buy scheme. Negative gearing is a good thing.
But it wasn't 3 years ago.
Negative gearing. We had a policy that we took to the election where we were not successful.
So is that why you're not approaching it?
You said...
It's just not popular.
Scott, I'll let you answer.
Sure.
We had... our Help to Buy scheme, you said was good for a decade, and now you're opposing it.
Not a government scheme, I didn't.
Now you did.
No, I was talking about private shared equity schemes, not government ones.
You were talking about the Victorian government scheme in 2017.
Not a federal government scheme.
OK. So you're in favour of state government Help to Buy schemes, but not federal government schemes.
There are state government Help to Buy schemes, but they're not federal ones, and I've never favoured a federal Help to Buy scheme.
Okay, all right. You encouraged federal Labor when we were last in government. You said
private ones done by banks.
This is
an opportunity for this is not an opportunity for statements. Can we get a very quick second question, Mr Albanese, to the Prime Minister?
My question to you, Scott, is this: the minimum wage in Australia is $20.33. Should all Australian workers be paid at least the minimum wage?
Well, it depends if they're running a business or not. I mean, if you're running a business, I can tell you who doesn't get the minimum wage necessarily. Small business owners when the money's not coming in the door.
That's not the question, Scott.
No, I'm sorry.
There are a whole lot of people out there who are working in the gig economy, and you're the Prime Minister of Australia, so they're not workers.
They're working they're working for themselves. That's why they do it.
But the gig economy, what it's doing is creating two classes of people. It's something that you don't seem to get. Two classes of people. Your Uber driver is not a small business person. There's someone trying to get by. There's someone who's trying to get by. And they've got an opportunity
to do just that, provided by a new economy business that is allowing them to take charge of their own life.
Agricultural workers. And? They shouldn't get minimum wage?
Agricultural workers who are were you referring to those who've come from overseas, Anthony, or talking about those who are working in Australia?
Agricultural workers.
Of course, agricultural workers where they're employed
but Scott,
in businesses
it's
get
actually
paid
possible.
At least the minimum wage, and I'm sure they get paid more than the minimum wage.
There are actually some gig companies that have come to agreements in order to treat people as employees so that they get those minimum conditions.
So Anthony, when we introduced our changes to the industrial laws, where we wanted to go and define these things around casualisation, why did you vote against it?
Oh, Scott, your industrial laws wanted to get rid of... I'll tell you why you asked the question. Yeah. Why we voted against it, because it wanted to get rid of the Better Off Overall test.
During the pandemic, for a brief period of time?
No.
It was.
Not at all.
Okay, all right.
You only want to get rid of the Better Off Overall test
if you don't want
workers to be better off overall. It's pretty simple.
Excuse me. We asked you both to ask each other a question. There's been several now. Very quickly, Prime Minister, your second question.
Yeah, your Help to Buy scheme. If there's a family, young person earning $80,000
very quickly, Prime Minister.
$80,000 a year, and their partner may be earning about $30,000 a year. They'll be eligible for your scheme to go and buy that home. That's right?
Yes.
OK, so let's just say the person who's earning $30,000 decides to go back to work full-time. They'll go over $120,000 a year. Now, under your policy, that means they'll have to pay you back your equity at 40%. Now, why is that a good thing to do in the design of that scheme, or didn't you just think it through?
You know what's happened in the design of the scheme? It's based upon schemes that are actually...
But is that true, what I've just told you?
It's based upon schemes that are actually operating.
Yeah, but is that true?
So, for example...
Would they have to pay back the 40%?
You will have flexibility in the scheme.
But do
and
they
in
have to
terms
pay
of
it back?
Victoria, you've asked your question,
Well, no, you haven't
Scott.
answered it, though.
You've asked your question.
Do they have to pay it back?
In Victoria, I've just said there will be flexibility and arrangements are
Yes
come
or no?
to. That's the way they operate now.
Do they have to pay it back or
That's
not?
the way they operate now. In places like
Of course
WA,
they have to pay it back.
in Victoria, that's not right,
You go back
Scott.
to work and you've got to
That's
sell
not
your
right.
house.
That's not
It's
right,
not,
Scott.
it's not help to buy, it's forced to sell.
Okay, all right.
not
Okay,
right.
this is
It-
more,
it's
that was more of a
complete
statement than a
nonsense.
question.
And-
We
and
will
you
just
have
get back to our
supported
panel
it.
now. You've
You
had
have
enough time.
supported it in the
Think it
past.
through, Anthony, and that's
Okay.
the problem.
You have
Mr
all the
Albanese, Mr
rhetoric.
Morrison, you've had enough time to ask each other questions.
Sarah,
We've
we're
given you
seeing
more than
why
enough.
Journalists get so frustrated when people don't answer their
Is
questions.
this a press conference or yes
have all
or
the
no
rhetoric.
questions? Can we get a bit more of that? Deb, over to you.
It is Mother's Day today, and I echo wishing all the mothers a happy Mother's Day today. A quick question to both of you. In a sentence, how do you define a woman, Mr Albanese?
An adult female.
An adult female.
Yeah.
Mr Morrison?
Yes, I'm a member of the female sex.
Because there's been a degree of confusion around that issue, so good to get your clarity on
Not
that.
confused at all.
I don't think it's confusing.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, women's issues and the treatment of women have dominated the last Parliament, but we've barely heard it greater mention during the campaign. Women's issues and the treatment of women specifically. Prime Minister, do you have a problem appealing to women, do you think?
1 in 11 women are the victims of domestic violence that results in their death in this country. 1 every 11 days, I should say. And that's why our government has put in $2.5 billion. Now, you say we haven't talked about it. This morning, I was with Jenny. We were down in Melbourne and we announced our policy to ensure that women who are suffering from cancer or have genetic diseases that could transmit, we're supporting them to be able to freeze their embryos and others, so when they're facing cancer, that they won't also face the terrible disappointment that one day they mightn't be able to have children. On top of that, we've expanded the Gidget Foundation, which is dealing with postnatal depression, and we're taking that from 20 outlets to a further 26. And this is addressing the real health needs of women.
But do you think that the issue of the treatment of women within Parliament has been resolved? Would you be happy for your own daughters to work in Parliament or to work in politics?
No, I'm sorry, I don't believe it's been resolved, but I do believe that as a result of the events that took place in Parliament, the Jenkins Review and before that the Foster Review that I initiated, means that the Parliament today, and I'm sure Anthony would agree, that together we have a leadership task force across parties that is fully implementing the outcomes of the Jenkins Review, and the timetable set for that was the next 2 years. But the Foster Review, most importantly, has put in place an independent mechanism for complaints to be dealt with, which ensures that there's anonymity, but also counselling support that we've put in place that's there 24/7. So do I believe it's fixed? I don't think it's fixed in any workplace around the country.
That's your time,
we need
Mr.
to do
Morrison.
what we need to do together to make the Parliament a safer place for women.
And Mr Albanese, I know that you echo that sentiment. You want workplaces to be safe for women. Why then won't you investigate the serious allegations of bullying and harassment of the late Senator Kimberley Kitching? Because many people very close to her believe that that treatment played a part in her death.
Well, I agree with Scott that we've worked together to improve the parliamentary mechanisms which are there, and they've passed with the support of the entire Parliament. And Kate Jenkins has played a very important role, as has Stephanie Foster. What we did in Labor was put together from under Bill Shorten in 2018 structures whereby there are procedures, again, very similar to the procedures that are now in place across the Parliament.
Why won't you launch an investigation specifically into the treatment of the late Senator Kimberley Kitching?
Well, Kimberley Kitching's death is a tragedy. She was just 52 years of age. The procedures that were in place have been in place for some time. Kimberley, like other members of the caucus, were all part of adopting them in 2021. They're comprehensive, they're very strong. But let me make this point as well. It's not just about people at Parliament House. Kate Jenkins has another report, the Respect at Work report. It has 55 recommendations which would apply to workplaces across the country. We need to do better.
Mr.
We will
Albanese-
adopt all 55 recommendations, including the obligations on employers to do what they can to make their workplaces safe.
You've been very critical, though, of the government's track record on this. How can you criticise them when you won't launch an investigation into claims of bullying by women who make up your front bench?
Look, I have utmost confidence in my front bench. And from time to time in politics, the truth is that in terms of the issue that's been raised about a committee position, from time to time there is conflict. More people want positions than are available. That happens. My experience with Kimberley Kitching was that she was making an outstanding contribution. I put her on the front bench. I kept her on the front bench. I think it is a tragedy that she was lost particularly to her family and her close friends, but to the Labor family as well, far too early.
Mr Albanese, on aged care, what do you do under your policy, which promises a lot, when a nursing home cannot afford to hire more nurses or can't find more nurses because there's a shortage? Do you shut them down?
No. Look, one of the things we'll do is work with the sector. The Aged Care Royal Commission was very clear. It made clear recommendations of a nurse in every nursing home, of 215 minutes of care, of better food and nutrition, of making sure aged care workers get better pay, and more transparency and accountability. And that's the basis of what we will take forward. Now, with regard to aged care nurses, the majority of nurses in the aged care sector right now are working part-time. So one of the things that we can do is to make sure that they get more hours and more contribution. And we have worked with the Nurses Federation on this policy.
Do you guarantee you'll have enough nurses next year?
We will deliver on our policies, and we will work with the Nurses Federation, not just in terms... One of the things that's happened as well is that nurses and other aged care workers have left the sector because of the pressure they're under. Imagine working in a nursing home and there are 4 buzzers going at once, and you've got to make a decision over where to go. We have circumstances whereby...
Mr Albanese, that is your time. David Crowe, your next question.
Mr Morrison, on aged care, do you accept that the neglect in aged care happened during 9 years of coalition government and it's the coalition's fault?
It occurred over 30 years. And that's exactly what the Royal Commission has said, and that is include over the last 9 years under the previous Labor government, under the previous Liberal government before that, and the Labor government before that. The problems in aged care are very difficult, and we all know what the problems are. The solutions are very difficult. And so when it comes to 24/7 nurses, our plan, October 2024, and to get to 16 hours out of 24 hours later this year. And we're investing $300 million to ensure that we're building up the nursing workforce. And
but if it happened for 9 years under your government...
Exactly, this is why
Why should voters trust you to fix it if it continued for that 9 years?
Because I was the one who blew the whistle. I was the one who called the Royal Commission into aged care. I was the one who then...
Scott, under pressure from the Labor Party, under pressure from the Labor Party, we called for a Royal Commission. We took it to elections. You didn't take it to an election. You rejected it. You rejected it.
No, he did it. And it's handed its recommendations down.
You did it reluctantly because you lost the numbers on the floor of the Parliament to do it.
Within weeks of becoming Prime Minister, I hasten to add, and we put $19.1 billion
because you lost the majority
into our response,
on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Our response of the aged care. Now, let me tell you what we've done on home care places. When we came to government, there were 60,000 home care places. Today, there are 225,000, and there'll be another 50,000. More and more Australians are going into home care. And in residential care, the needs are greater because the acute care needs in residential care have been growing year on year on year. This is a very hard problem, and it can't be simply just dismissed with a couple of glib papers here and there. Yep. What we've got is $19.1 billion of investment to fix the problem.
Prime Minister, you've drawn a red line on any Chinese military bases in the Solomon Islands. What does that mean?
Well, it means that was something that Australia believes would be completely against our national interest, and we also would believe it would be against the Solomon Islands' national interest. And we share that view and the similar language with the United States. I mean, it's 80 years ago right now since Australia and the United States were battling in the Coral Sea. And we're here again right now working together with our partners, with New Zealand, with the other many Pacific nations to ensure that we can secure the peace and stability within the Pacific.
But you understand that you do have to
sorry.
enforce this. You do have to enforce this in some way. Are you saying that you would be prepared, for example, to try and blockade any attempt to build a military base on the Solomon Islands?
I think it would be very unwise for any government to speculate around these issues. What is necessary in international environments such as this is to be very clear about what the various partners' positions are. That's the United States position, it's certainly our position, and I believe it's a broader position of the Pacific Island family as well, and I do not believe it would be in the Solomon Islands' interest, and the Solomon Islands government themselves have made it very clear to us that that is not an outcome they are seeking or supporting either. Well, I believe it's not in their national interest to have such a presence.
Well, what's the point? What's the point of talking about a red line if we don't know what you're going to step over it to take action?
No, what it means is that everybody has a clear understanding about what the positions are of the major partners.
Do you have a clear understanding of what that red line is? Because it seems the public doesn't.
No, I think Australians understand that Australia would work with partners to ensure that that type of an outcome would be prevented.
This has been a massive foreign policy failure. Some have commentated that it's the biggest failure since the Second World War. The government said they were going to have a Pacific step up. Instead, it's a Pacific stuff up. We know that China is more aggressive and forward-leaning in the region. We know they're trying to increase their influence in the region, and this has happened on the government's watch.
I did have a question for you.
This has happened on the government's watch. Well, I'll tell you what we did.
Why did you cut defence spending?
You just asked the question, so do I get to answer it?
I'd like you to answer why you cut defence spending.
Okay. I'll make this comment, Scott. When I was a minister, we put US Marines into Darwin. When you've been a minister, we've had the Port of Darwin sold to a company connected with the Chinese Communist Party.
Not by the Commonwealth government.
By your party, with your tick-off.
You've been telling this lie
with your tick-off.
telling this lie for some time.
Your party with your tick-off. You allowed it to happen.
No, we didn't. The federal government had absolutely no authority over that sale whatsoever.
Over territories.
No, we didn't. Not over the sale of territory-owned assets of that nature.
Federal government.
I think we're getting more questions between the Excuse me. I think we're getting more questions between the two of you than our panel.
No authority whatsoever. This is a very important point. I'm sorry. This is a very important point.
No, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Albanese, that's enough. We do need to move on.
Depends upon Commonwealth funding.
Here,
you could not have had any influence over the CLP government in the territory when they flogged off the Port of Darwin to China.
Can you please?
To make sure we did.
You both agreed to the rules for this evening.
The Labor Party actually had in place previously,
Chris Hillman has a question, and we will move on to Chris's question.
The Labor Party was dragged reluctantly to the position of believing that China was a threat. You say that we say China had changed. Right. You only began saying that in the last couple of years.
I opposed the sale of the Port of Darwin at the time.
How can we have confidence in the Labor Party
Labor's shadow
that it will stand up to
minister.
China when some of the loudest voices in the country on being pro-Beijing come from inside your party? Some of
deputy leader,
your elders.
Well, that's an outrageous slur.
He runs his speeches past the Chinese government.
Labor has always been good on national security. I'll tell you who Australia turned to in World War II, in our darkest hour, John Curtin. John Curtin became Prime Minister without an election. Labor will always take national security issues seriously. We took the issue of the Port of China. It's not a former Labor minister who went on the board of the company that runs the Port of Darwin.
Bob Carr and Paul Keating thinks it's Australia's fault that the relationship is where it is now.
It is China's fault.
It is China's fault.
Well, she
has changed. She has changed the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. And it was Tony Abbott that invited Xi to address the National Parliament. That at the time was not greatly controversial. The Chinese Communist Party has changed. It's more forward-leaning, it's more aggressive, and that means that Australia, of course, must respond. And we must work with our allies and partners in the new era of strategic competition,
so how many
which
times
is in our
has Richard
region.
Marles met with the Chinese ambassador in Australia? He's your deputy leader.
That is just an outrageous
I'm just
slur.
asking you, how many times? Do you know?
Well, how many times has your government that you're a part of invited the leader of the Chinese Communist Party to address the Australian Parliament?
Once.
Once. It's the only time it's happened. Labor never did.
Yeah,
Labor never did.
So just getting back to your deputy leader who wants to be the defence minister, who runs his speeches past the Chinese government.
That is an outrageous slur.
That's the truth.
I'll say what Richard Marles did.
The questions that the voters are interested in having answered.
Richard Marles went to China and criticised their human rights record.
Thank you, Mr.
Albanese. Thank you.
No, their human rights record in China. Something that Stuart Robert, your best mate, went to China when he was the Defence Assistant Minister.
Have had more than enough time.
And he got sacked from his job, but you put him back in the cabinet
before coming on the program tonight.
We do want to talk about the pandemic as well. Mr. Morrison, you keep telling us how well your government did during the pandemic, but you did also stop Australians coming back to their own country because there weren't enough quarantine places for them. Was that a moment of shame for Australia and for you?
No, that wasn't the reason why we did that. We did it because at that time there was the outbreak of the Delta strain in India. And for a period of time, it was only for a couple of weeks, we actually froze the return of Australians who were in India coming back to Australia for a very brief period of time. And that was done on the basis of medical advice.
But it wasn't just India, was it? There were Australians in places all around the world who were struggling to get back home.
Well, I thought you were referring to Australian citizens or residents when you asked the question.
There were many in the UK who wanted to come home sooner.
But Australian citizens were actually barred from coming back to Australia. I thought that's what you were referring to.
They did struggle to get back here.
Legally barred from doing so. And as a result, we were able to avoid for some period of time the terrible impacts of that Delta strain had we allowed that to come in. But one of the things that we did together with the state governments right from the outset is we agreed to put in place a quarantine system that was done with the states through hotels, which massively increased the capacity for us to have people come to Australia. You can't set up quarantine facilities for 50, 100,000 people just to be turning up every other day.
That's your time, Prime Minister.
And as a result, we put in place that system and it was very effective.
Prime Minister. That's enough.
Mr. Albanese, your plans during the pandemic, you've been very critical of the government, but your plans during the pandemic included $6 billion in payments to get people vaccinated, which they did anyway, included free rat tests, which people can get now, included big quarantine centres. If those were such good ideas during the pandemic, why aren't you keeping them now?
Because they were ideas based upon limiting the impact of the pandemic. If we'd have got people vaccinated earlier, there would have been less shutdowns, less jobs lost, less impact on small business, less impact on people's health. When rapid antigen tests were available, we had a circumstance whereby people were told, go into your chemist if you're a concessional card holder and get one, but people couldn't get access to them. That's been a problem. The government was too little too late on getting the vaccine rollout happening, and it didn't learn the lessons, and the same thing happened on rapid antigen tests.
So all their ideas, or they've made mistakes, but your ideas were all fine. Weren't some of those ideas just wrong for the time?
No, they were right for the time because they would have limited the impact. You needed to act with a sense of urgency, not the sense of complacency saying it's not a race. And that's something that has defined
to pay money to
this
people
Prime
who already
Minister.
had the vaccine.
That is something that has defined this Prime Minister. It doesn't matter whether it's the bushfires or the floods or the vaccine rollout or the rapid antigen
Mr. Albanese,
test.
Deborah and
It's
I have the
always
next question.
too little,
Mr.
too
Albanese,
late.
that's enough. Thank you.
Prime Minister, a lot of the independents who are targeting Liberal seats, the so-called teal independents, are saying point blank they don't want to work with you. In the event of a hung parliament, will you put the interests of your party above your own interests and resign as leader if that's what it takes to form government?
Well, what I'm advocating is that votes for independents, and particularly those you refer to at this election, is a recipe for chaos.
But if that's what it takes for the hung parliament...
And that's why, in the course of an election, which is where we are right now, I'm urging strongly against such a vote, because you can't vote for someone who won't tell you how they will vote. And that will throw Australia into a position of great chaos I mean, Rob Oakeshott used to say that the minority parliament would be beautiful in its ugliness. It was just ugly.
But in the result
and we can't afford that ugliness with the crises and the challenges we're facing now. So I would urge people not to go down that path. That is a vote for chaos, and that will really prejudice your own interests, the Australian economy, and the strength of a government to deal with very major national security issues.
In the result of a hung parliament, though, voters need to know if they vote for you, will they get Prime Minister Dutton?
What I'm saying very clearly is that we have said that we won't be doing deals on policies that we don't support. That's what I've said very clearly. Now, we don't support a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030. That will destroy the economy.
Mr Morrison, is that a yes or a no? You said before you want yes or no answers. Is that a yes or a no answer to Deb's question?
Would you be prepared to resign if that's what it took to form government?
No, what I'd simply say... Well, would you?
It's a pretty clear question.
Would you?
I'm actually... Thanks for the question, Scott.
Would you?
I am the only person running for Prime Minister in this election who's trying to form government in their own right.
Well, no, sorry, Anthony, we're both doing that.
No, you're not.
That's just
no, you're not.
it
You're
off.
part of a coalition with Barnaby Joyce.
Mr Albanese,
and we
here's a
have been
question
since
for you
1944.
On that key point, here's a question for you, Mr Albanese. You've ruled out a negotiation with the crossbench on your climate target.
Yes.
So what will you negotiate on?
We will not negotiate on any of the policies that we're taking to this election. But what's more, I'm seeking to form government with 76 ALP members, 76 members of the Labor caucus. We are campaigning each and every day with Labor members right across the country.
Are you ruling out any deals on anything with the crossbench?
To make sure we won't... You don't have to look theoretically. In 2013, when I became the Deputy Prime Minister under Kevin Rudd, we didn't do any deals. We went onto the floor of that Parliament
with the Greens
and said, you can make it. You can have a choice. You can have Tony Abbott as Prime Minister or Kevin Rudd. They're the choices. And what I will say is that I am campaigning very hard to form government in my own right, not as part of a coalition with anyone, certainly not like the rabble.
Well, let's just be clear.
that
You're
we see.
talking about the government
There is very little time
that
left.
did a deal with the Greens to be in government.
Mr Morrison, thank you.
I saw the pictures.
No,
Everyone
that's
did.
enough. Thank you. We have the next
we're
question.
almost done and hoping to end on something that is a little bit less combative. Will Australians continue to have access to the sports they love on free-to-air TV if you are in power, Prime Minister?
Well, we're both promising a review on that issue. So I think the position is the same. So
No, I'm promising a bit more than that. I'm saying, yes, of course, the sports that are essential should be available to all Australians, but something else we need to address as well is making sure there's proper regulation so that when people pick up their remote and they've got their smart TV, they can get access easily.
That's the same policy that we have.
Well, you haven't done anything about it.
No,
the difference is
exactly the same.
You haven't done anything about
exactly
it.
The same
we've got a
meetings.
policy we've taken to this election recognising.
So, short story is Sharks versus
that they
Rabbitohs on free-to-air TV in the future.
Well, I'm sure if it's a game of the round as it currently works on those arrangements. But we're saying the same thing when it comes to that issue. He's promising a review, one of 53 reviews that he's going to do once he gets there. They'll work it out when they get there, apparently.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, no,
All right. Well, we're done. Look, you've given us a lot to think about tonight. We know that there are undecided voters out there, and tonight has been very popular with the audience, so we thank you both for your time. Mr Morrison, Mr Albanese. We are out of time, sadly. There was a pretty heated discussion between the two of you. I mean, our panel did get in some questions, but we do have one final word from the pair of you, a closing statement from each of you. Prime Minister, you gave the opening statement. You'll go first with the closing statement.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your attention tonight. This election is a choice. It's a choice that is going to impact significantly on the future of all Australians. It's a choice between a government that has a strong economic plan that has ensured that Australia is coming out of this pandemic stronger than almost any advanced economy in the world today, with unemployment falling, with a AAA credit rating, and a budget that turned around by over $100 billion in the last 12 months so we can provide real cost of living relief. A plan that's investing in small businesses, in skills, in infrastructure, investing in the better roads and ensuring the essential services you can rely on, whether it's Medicare, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, because we know how to run a strong economy. We're a known quantity, and in a time of great uncertainty and great risk, now is not time to risk things on the unknown. Labor have no plan. They are unknown and a risk. A small target is always a big risk, and I think over the course of this campaign, as they've put forward what they've been talking about, Australians have been seeing and asking the question, are they really up to this? And is Mr Albanese really up to this? You know what we've achieved together, and we can keep achieving that by sticking to that strong plan, because a strong economy means a stronger future.
You went over a little bit there, Mr Morrison. Mr Albanese, we'll give you the same time.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you, Scott and Nine for hosting the debate, and thank you, the viewers at home, for watching this evening. You do have a choice when it comes to an election. You know that at the moment the cost of everything is going up, but your wages aren't. You do have a choice to change the country for the better. And we can do so much better than we're doing right now. There are real issues right now. Childcare costs are spiralling right now. Aged care is in crisis right now. Work has never been more insecure than it is right now. Climate change is an opportunity, not just a challenge right now. In spite of the floods and the bushfires, what does it take to wake up to this government to the need to take serious action on climate change? We need greater equality for women right now. We need to increase women's economic participation as well as make workplaces safer right now. These are all issues that Australia has the opportunity to go forward in and create a better future if we seize that opportunity. I believe Australia is the greatest country on earth, but with a better government, we can be an even better country into the future. And I will say this, there are four words you'll never hear from me. That's not my job. I'll never say it. If I get the job, I'll do the job each and every day.
That's your time, Mr Albanese. Well, look, thank you to both Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese for taking part tonight. Early voting in the election, as we know, opens tomorrow morning, and we hope the answers tonight have given Australians a clearer idea of how you'll vote. As for who won this debate, well, that's up to you at home. We know that there is a huge amount of traffic via the QR code on our website. Please be patient, do keep trying, you will get through. Those who have been trying have gotten through, so stick it out for a bit longer. Our radio listeners, of course, can head to 9news.com.au. You have a few more minutes now to give your anonymous verdict. We'll bring you the results of our special post-debate analysis, which is coming up. You're watching a 60 Minutes special event. We're back in a moment. Hello, I'm Sarah Abo. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.